The disapproving glance from my sister Veronica as she assessed my 10-year-old Honda Civic in the driveway of Aunt Elaine's sprawling lakeside estate made my stomach tighten with a familiar discomfort. She stood beside her gleaming Mercedes-Benz SUV, designer sunglasses perched perfectly atop her highlighted blonde hair, whispering something to her husband Derek that made them both smirk in my direction. Little did Veronica know that in less than 4 hours, the careful façade she'd constructed would crumble when I revealed the truth I'd kept hidden for nearly 3 years, that I was the majority owner and silent CEO of Meridian Dynamics, the very company where she'd recently been promoted to vice president of marketing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I clutched the cake carrier in my hands a little tighter. The homemade lemon chiffon inside, my mother's recipe, suddenly feeling like an inadequate offering for the annual Lancaster family reunion. The moment perfectly captured our lifelong dynamic. Veronica, the successful corporate climber with the perfect life, and me, Rebecca, supposedly the underachieving younger sister who couldn't seem to get it together. "Becca, you made it!" My cousin Talia rushed down the stone pathway, her genuine warmth a welcome contrast to Veronica's chill. "I was worried you might back out after last year's incident." Last year's incident being Veronica's 20-minute toast that somehow transformed into a thinly veiled commentary on my career choices, featuring phrases like, "Sometimes the path less traveled leads nowhere," and "Success requires sacrifice, not settling." I'd sat through it, smiling tightly as our relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "And Miss Aunt Elaine's famous sangria?" "Never," I replied, forcing brightness into my voice. "Besides, I promised Mom I'd be here." Our mother had passed away 18 months ago after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. Her final request had been for her daughters to maintain family connections despite our differences, a promise I intended to honor, even when it meant enduring Veronica's judgment. "Well, I'm glad. Come on in. Most everyone's around the back at the pool." I followed Talia through Aunt Elaine's impressively renovated Victorian home in Westlake Heights, the exclusive neighborhood in Cedar Grove where property values started at 7 figures. Family photos lined the hallway, generations of Lancasters, including several featuring Veronica and me as children, arms wrapped around each, other gap-toothed smiles revealing a closeness long since disappeared. "Rebecca, darling, you're here." Aunt Elaine emerged from the kitchen, elegant as always in linen pants and a silk blouse despite the summer heat. She embraced me warmly, taking the cake. "Oh, your mother's lemon chiffon. You're such a treasure for continuing Caroline's traditions." "It's the least I could do," I said, helping her transfer the cake to a crystal pedestal. "I saw your sister arrived just before you," Aunt Elaine mentioned, her tone carefully neutral. Everyone in the family was aware of the tension between us. "She's been telling everyone about her promotion at Meridian. Quite the accomplishment." "Yes, it certainly is," I agreed sincerely. Veronica was talented. That had never been in question. Her ethics and treatment of others, however, were another matter entirely. I stepped through the French doors onto the back terrace, where 20-some Lancaster relatives were scattered across the professionally landscaped backyard. Conversations hummed over the sound of splashing from the infinity pool that overlooked the lake. Several cousins waved. My Uncle Philip raised his glass in greeting, and there was Veronica, holding court near the outdoor bar, commanding attention, as she always had. Even at 38, 2 years my senior, she retained the poise and confidence that had made her high school prom queen and college valedictorian. "Rebecca," Veronica called, her voice carrying just enough volume to draw everyone's attention. "I was just telling everyone about the sustainability initiative I'm launching at Meridian. It's going to revolutionize how the entire industry approaches environmental impact." I smiled and nodded, pouring myself a glass of water from a pitcher on the nearby table. "That sounds impressive, Veronica." It is, she continued, stepping closer. The CEO basically gave me carte blanche with the budget. Speaking of which, her gaze flicked to my simple sundress from a department store rather than a boutique. Are things still tight for you? I noticed you're still driving that old Honda. Several relatives suddenly found their drinks fascinating, avoiding the uncomfortable exchange. Derek, ever his wife's loyal supporter, smirked behind his craft beer. My car gets me where I need to go, I replied evenly. Of course, of course. Veronica nodded with exaggerated understanding. We all make choices. I've just always believed that how you present yourself to the world matters in business, first impressions and all that. How wise of you, I said, maintaining my composure. 3 more hours, I reminded myself. 3 more hours until the conference call that would bring certain truths to light. Derek and I were actually discussing whether we should help you with a down payment on something more current, she continued, her voice dripping with magnanimous condescension. After all, family should look out for each other. The familiar heat of humiliation crept up my neck. This was Veronica's specialty, offering help in ways that emphasized what she perceived as my shortcomings, delivered with just enough sincerity that outright rejection would make me seem ungrateful. That's very kind, I managed. But unnecessary. Are you sure? It's really no trouble. We just finalized the purchase of our lake house last month. The market was too perfect to pass up. A little help for my struggling sister would hardly dent the budget. I caught Uncle Philip's eye roll behind Veronica's back, his sympathy evident. He'd always seen through Veronica's performative generosity. I'm quite comfortable with my financial situation, Veronica, I said, more firmly this time. The irony of her condescension when I could purchase her home, her Mercedes, and her lake house with a fraction of my net worth almost made me break my years-long silence prematurely. But patience had gotten me this far. 3 more hours. If you say so, she shrugged, turning back to her audience. Now, as I was saying about my sustainability initiative, I slipped away to the dock, seeking momentary peace at the water's edge. The late afternoon sun sparkled. Across Lake Westlake, power boats and jet skis carving white paths in the distance. I checked my phone. 2:37 p.m. At 5:30 exactly, everything would change. Not just for Veronica, but for all of us. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As I settled on the weathered wooden dock, memories of childhood summers spent swimming in this lake with Veronica floated through my mind. Back then, we'd been inseparable. She teaching me to dive, me making her laugh, with underwater handstands. Before competition and comparison had soured our relationship. Before our father had pitted us against each other, perhaps unintentionally. With his constant praise of Veronica's achievements and quiet disappointment in my different path. My phone buzzed with a message from Eliza Chen, my chief operations officer and trusted right hand at Meridian. Final paperwork signed. Legal confirms everything's in order for the announcement. Conference bridge opens at 5:15. Announcement at 5:30 sharp. I sent back a quick thumbs up, my heartbeat quickening. This moment had been 3 years in the making, since I'd founded Axion Capital with my innovative investment algorithm and began quietly acquiring companies in the tech and sustainability sectors. Meridian Dynamics had been my largest and most strategic acquisition, though I'd maintained my anonymity by working through holding companies and trusted representatives like Eliza. Only 5 people in the world knew I was Meridian's actual owner and CEO. The board believed the company was run by a reclusive tech genius who preferred to communicate through intermediaries. Veronica had never questioned this arrangement, too delighted by her rapid promotions to look deeper into the unusual. Corporate structure? Mind if I join you? I looked up to see Uncle Philip approaching, 2 glasses of sangria in hand. At 65, he remained athletic and sharp, his silver hair the only indication of his age. He'd been my mother's brother and had always shown me a special kindness, perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit who valued substance over appearance. "Please," I gestured to the space beside me, accepting the offered drink. "Taking a break from the Veronica show?" He chuckled, settling next to me. "Something like that. Though I'm more concerned about you. She's in rare form today." "I've dealt with worse," I shrugged. "You shouldn't have to," he replied, his tone serious. "Caroline would be heartbroken to see how she treats you." I sipped the sangria, the sweet wine and fruit momentarily distracting me from the afternoon's tension. Mom always hoped we'd reconcile, that Veronica would outgrow whatever this is. "Insecurity," Philip said simply. "It might surprise you, but beneath all that bravado, Veronica's terrified of failure. Your father didn't help matters with his constant pressure on her to be perfect." "Dad certainly had his favorites," I murmured, thinking of the countless piano recitals and science fairs my father had missed, while never failing to attend Veronica's events. "Samuel Lancaster was brilliant with investments, but lacking as a father," Philip agreed. "Speaking of investments, how's your work going? Still consulting for those tech startups?" This was the simplified version of my career I'd offered my family. That, after leaving corporate finance 5 years ago, I'd become a consultant for early-stage companies. It wasn't entirely untrue, just radically incomplete. "It's going well," I said, unable to suppress a small smile. "Actually, I've got something important happening at 5:30 today." Philip raised an eyebrow. "Important enough to interrupt a Lancaster family reunion? That must be significant." "Let's just say it's been a long time coming," I replied, my gaze drifting toward the house where I could see Veronica still holding court, gesturing animatedly as Derek nodded beside her. "Mysterious as always," Philip smiled. "You know, Rebecca, whatever it is you're actually doing, I've always suspected it's something extraordinary. You have your mother's quiet determination." His perceptiveness startled me. "What makes you think I'm not just a struggling consultant?" "For one, that watch you're wearing." He nodded toward my wrist. "It's a Patek Philippe, isn't it? Limited edition. About $80,000, if I recall correctly from my watchmaking hobby." I instinctively covered it with my hand. It had been a gift to myself when Meridian's sustainable energy division had secured a $100 million government contract, a small indulgence in an otherwise deliberately modest lifestyle. "Second," he continued, "the way you respond to Veronica's condescension. Not with resentment, but with almost amusement? Like you know something no one else does." I studied my uncle's shrewd expression, wondering how much to reveal. "You're very observant. A lifetime in international diplomacy teaches you to notice details," he replied. As a former ambassador, Philip had developed a keen eye for human behavior. "Plus, I checked the business registration for your consulting firm last year out of curiosity. Quite the elaborate structure for a small operation, involving several holding companies and offshore entities. Not typical for someone struggling financially." My phone buzzed again, a reminder for a pre-call briefing with my executive team at 4:30. "Uncle Philip, No need to explain," he interrupted gently. "We all have our reasons for the stories we tell. I'm just concerned about what appears to be building between you and Veronica. These family tensions have a way of becoming permanent if left unaddressed." I sighed, knowing he was right. "After today, things will change. I can't say more than that right now." Philip nodded, respecting my discretion. "Just remember that success, however you define it, doesn't heal family wounds on its own. Sometimes it only deepens them." His words followed me as we walked back to the house, where the reunion had evolved into smaller conversation clusters. Aunt Elaine was organizing an impromptu family photo, while my cousins debated which board games to set up for the evening. "Rebecca," she called, waving me over. We're gathering everyone for a picture before the sun gets too low. Where's Veronica? I think she went inside, someone offered. Said she needed to freshen up. As if summoned, Veronica emerged from the house, phone in hand, her expression triumphant. That was Jackson from the executive team, she announced, not bothering to lower her voice. The CEO is making some major announcement today, and they specifically requested I be on the call. Apparently, my sustainability initiative has caught attention at the highest levels. She glanced at her designer watch. The call's at 5:30, so I'll need to step away for about half an hour. Important company business, you understand. We're just about to take the family photo, Aunt Elaine said, disappointment evident. Can it wait? This could mean another promotion? For me, Veronica replied, already settling into a chair on the terrace, opening her laptop. I checked my own watch. 4:20. I needed privacy for my pre-call briefing with Eliza and the executive team. Actually, I need to make a call too, I said. Work issue that can't wait. Veronica's eyebrows shot up. What kind of consulting emergency could possibly be so urgent? Her finger quotes around consulting dripped with skepticism. You'd be surprised, I replied mildly, refusing to take the bait. Aunt Elaine, we can do the photo after our calls, can't we? Our aunt sighed with the resignation of someone used to navigating family dynamics. Of course, dears. Business first, I suppose. I'll use the study, if that's all right, I told her, already moving toward the house. Fine. Veronica, you can use the sunroom if you need privacy. As I passed Veronica, she gave me a condescending smile. Big consultant business, huh? Is one of your little startup clients having a crisis of confidence? I paused, meeting her gaze directly. Something like that. Enjoy your call. Inside the quiet of Aunt Elaine's wood-paneled study, I shut the door and set up my laptop. Eliza's face appeared on screen promptly at 4:30, along with the other 4 members of my core leadership team. Everything's prepared, Rebecca, Eliza confirmed, her characteristic efficiency evident in her crisp delivery. The acquisition announcement is ready to go public immediately following the company meeting. PR has prepared statements, and the board has signed off on all transitions of leadership. Excellent, I nodded, feeling surprisingly calm now that the moment approached. And the integration plan for the merger? Fully developed and ready for implementation, James Kingston, my chief strategy officer, replied. The synergies between Meridian and our renewable energy division at Axion are substantial. Conservative projections show 22% growth in the first year alone. What about personnel transitions? I asked, thinking specifically of one VP of marketing. All outlined in the documents you approved, Eliza answered, including the special case we discussed. I nodded, understanding her discretion. Any last-minute concerns I should be aware of? My team exchanged glances before Marcus Lee, Chief Financial Officer, spoke up. Rebecca, are you certain about doing this today? The timing seems personal. He wasn't wrong. I could have made this announcement any day over the past 3 months. Choosing today during the family reunion was deliberate. The timing is strategic for several reasons, I said carefully. And yes, some are personal, but my decision-making remains sound. They nodded, having learned to trust my judgment over the years of building Axion into a billion-dollar enterprise. Very well, Eliza concluded. We'll reconvene on the main conference bridge at 5:15. The company-wide announcement begins at 5:30 sharp. As the call ended, I sat back in my chair, contemplating the path that had led to this moment. The years of being underestimated, of Veronica's dismissal of my career choices, of being the family disappointment, all while secretly building something remarkable. In less than an hour, everything would change. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Uncle Philip stood in the doorway, his expression concerned. Everything all right in here? You seemed quite intense during your call. Just finalizing some details, I said, closing my laptop. Big day at work. He studied me carefully. Big enough to disrupt the careful narrative you've maintained all these years? My surprise must have shown on my face, because he chuckled, softly. Rebecca, I've watched you navigate family gatherings for years, with the patience of someone playing a very long game. Whatever's happening at 5:30, I suspect it's the endgame. I hesitated, then nodded once. You could say that. Then I hope it brings you what you're looking for, he said gently. Just remember that some victories feel hollow once achieved. As he left, I wondered if he was right. If the satisfaction I anticipated would be as sweet as I imagined, or if it would leave a different taste altogether. The gathering had shifted to the sprawling back patio by the time I emerged from the study. Aunt Elaine's catering staff was setting up for dinner, arranging elegant platters of appetizers while bartenders prepared drinks at the outdoor bar. The scent of grilling steaks mingled with the fragrance of flowers from the meticulously maintained gardens. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the picturesque family scene. Veronica stood near the pool, gesturing emphatically as she spoke with our cousin Martin, a real estate developer whose admiration for my sister had been obvious since childhood. Her laptop was positioned on a nearby table, ready for her important call. Even in the casual setting of a family reunion, she maintained her corporate persona, shoulders back, chin lifted, one hand casually resting on her hip in a power pose. I suspected she'd practiced in front of a mirror. I checked my watch, 5:07. 23 minutes until everything changed. Before we all get too comfortable, Aunt Elaine called, clapping her hands to gather everyone's attention, I'd like to ask you all to join me in raising a glass to Caroline. This is our first summer reunion without her, and I know she would have loved seeing us all together. A hush fell over the gathering as family members reached for their drinks. My throat tightened as I thought of my mother, who had always been the family peacemaker, especially between Veronica and me. To Caroline, Uncle Philip said, raising his glass, who taught us the meaning of grace under pressure. To Mom, Veronica added, her voice carrying across the patio, who always believed in reaching for the highest achievements in life. I couldn't help but notice how she'd turned even this toast into a reference to her own success-oriented mindset. Still, I raised my glass along with everyone else, remembering my mother's patient smile and the way she'd squeeze my hand reassuringly whenever Dad had praised Veronica while overlooking my accomplishments. And now, Aunt Elaine continued once we'd all sipped our drinks, before Rebecca and Veronica need to step away for their work calls, I'd love for us to take that family photo. Everyone to the lakeside pergola, please. The family began moving toward the elaborate white structure covered in climbing roses at the edge of the property, where the late afternoon sun would provide perfect lighting. I followed, only to feel a hand on my arm. It was Veronica. Listen, Becca, she said, using my childhood nickname in that patronizing tone she'd perfected. I hope I didn't embarrass you earlier with the car comment. I'm just concerned, you know? At 36, you should be further along financially. I'm worried you're not planning properly for retirement. I stared at her, marveling at her ability to frame condescension as concern. I appreciate your worry, but it's misplaced. Is it? She glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot before continuing. Look, we both know consulting is just a fancy word for between real jobs. There's no stability there, no real future. If you'd stuck with Morgan Stanley instead of running off to find yourself, or whatever it was you did, you'd be a managing director by now. The familiar criticism stung less than it once had, cushioned by the knowledge of what was to come. Still, I couldn't resist asking, and that would make you happy? If I'd followed the same path you did? She blinked, seemingly taken aback by the direct question. Well, of course, you'd be successful. By your definition of success. By everyone's definition, she insisted. Financial security, professional, recognition, respect in the industry. Instead, you drive that embarrassing car and wear off-the-rack clothes while claiming to be content. It reflects poorly on the family, Becca. On me. And there it was. The real issue. In Veronica's mind, my perceived failure diminished her by association. Everyone is heading to the pergola, I said, stepping away from her. Shouldn't we join them for the photo? She checked her watch, a Rolex that I knew had been a gift to herself after her last promotion. Fine, but let's make it quick. My call is in 15 minutes, and I need to prepare. Heaven forbid you're not perfectly prepared, I murmured, earning a sharp look as we walked toward the assembled family. Before we continue with this wonderful family reunion, drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button right now because tomorrow's video reveals an unexpected twist in Rebecca's journey that you won't want to miss. Aunt Elaine had arranged us in 3 rows, taller adults standing at the back, shorter adults seated in chairs in the middle, and the few children present cross-legged on the ground in front. Veronica positioned herself prominently in the center of the back row, while I stood toward the end, partially obscured by Uncle Philip's tall frame. Everyone say Lancaster, Aunt Elaine's husband Gerald called as he set the camera timer and hurried to join the group. Lancaster, the family chorused as the camera flashed several times in succession. Perfect, Gerald declared after checking the results. Got some good ones. As the group dispersed, heading back toward the food and drinks, I noticed Veronica, immediately returning to her laptop, her posture tense with anticipation. The knowledge that I was the source of that upcoming call, that I controlled the very situation she was preparing to impress everyone with, gave me a satisfaction I wasn't entirely proud of. You seem about to burst with a secret, came Uncle Philip's voice beside me. Care to share with your favorite uncle what's about to happen? I smiled, despite myself. You've always been my only uncle, so the favorite designation wasn't much of a competition. Semantics, he waved dismissively. My question stands. I glanced toward Veronica, now arranging herself artfully in a chair with the lake as her backdrop, clearly preparing for a video call. Let's just say that sometimes the universe has a way of revealing unexpected truths. Philip followed my gaze, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Rebecca, he said slowly, what exactly is your connection to Meridian Dynamics? Before I could formulate a suitably vague response, my phone buzzed. The executive team was gathering on the conference bridge. I need to take this call, I said, genuinely apologetic. But I promise you'll understand everything very soon. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll be interested to see how this plays out. I retreated to Aunt Elaine's study again, settling into the leather chair behind the antique desk. My laptop screen showed the waiting room for the company-wide video conference. Already, over 200 participants had joined, with the number climbing steadily. Meridian employed nearly 1,000 people across 8 offices globally, though only the executive team and department heads would have video enabled for this call. Eliza's face appeared in a private message window. Everything's set. The board. Members are in a separate briefing room where I've just informed them you'll be revealing yourself as the owner and CEO. They're surprised, to say the least. I could imagine. The board had been dealing with a mysterious founder for 3 years, receiving directives and strategic guidance through Eliza as the public-facing COO. Today would be their first time seeing the person behind the curtain. And Veronica? I asked. She just logged in. Video enabled, looking very professional by a lake. Interesting choice of location for an executive call. I smiled wryly. Family reunion. She's multitasking. Ah, Eliza nodded, understanding dawning in her expression. So that's why today. She doesn't know, does she? Not yet. Eliza, who had been my roommate at business school and one of the few people who understood the complicated dynamics with my sister, gave me a measured look. Are you sure about this? Revealing yourself so publicly? It's time, I said simply. The company's expansion requires me to step forward, and the merger announcement is the perfect opportunity. She nodded, professional as always despite her personal reservations. It's 5:29, ready when you are. I took a deep breath, centering myself. 3 years of building Meridian from a struggling mid-sized tech company into an industry leader in sustainable technologies. 3 years of being underestimated by my sister, listening to her condescension about my career choices while she unknowingly worked for me. 3 years of maintaining the charade for strategic reasons that had gradually become more personal than I cared to admit. The clock turned to 5:30. "Begin the call," I instructed Eliza, straightening in my chair and adjusting my camera. The screen, filled with faces, the executive team, department heads from around the world, and the board members in their separate room. And there, in one corner of my screen, was Veronica, looking polished and attentive, clearly expecting an announcement about her sustainability initiative. "Good evening, everyone," I began, watching as confusion spread across multiple faces, most notably my sister's. For those who don't know me, my name is Rebecca Lancaster. For the past 3 years, I have been the majority owner and CEO of Meridian Dynamics, operating through my investment firm, Axion Capital. I paused, allowing the information to register. Veronica's confusion had transformed into wide-eyed shock, her mouth slightly open as she stared at her screen. "Today marks an important evolution in our company's journey," I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me as I watched my sister's world shift on its axis. "I'm pleased to announce that Meridian Dynamics will be merging with Axion's renewable energy division to create Meridian Axion Global, positioning us as the industry leader in sustainable technology solutions." The expressions on screen ranged from surprise to excitement, except for Veronica, whose face had gone completely pale. I continued the announcement, outlining the strategic benefits of the merger while watching the variety of reactions across my screen. The board members nodded approvingly. They'd already received preliminary financial projections showing substantial growth potential. The executive team maintained professional expressions, despite what must have been considerable surprise. And Veronica, my confident, always-in-control sister, looked as though she'd seen a ghost. "This merger represents not just a combination of assets and technologies," I explained, "but a unified vision for the future of sustainable innovation. Together, we'll accelerate our impact on global energy solutions while strengthening our market position." As I detailed the integration timeline and leadership structure, I could see Veronica struggling to regain her composure. Her eyes darted nervously, likely wondering if anyone else on the call knew of our relationship. From the corner of my screen, I noticed James Kingston, my chief strategy officer, watching her reaction with particular interest. He'd been on the receiving end of Veronica's dismissive treatment during her rise through the marketing department. "I'll now turn the call over to Eliza Chen, our Chief Operations Officer, to walk through the specifics of our integration plan," I said, concluding my initial remarks. As Eliza began her detailed presentation, complete with organizational charts and transition timelines, I kept my focus on Veronica. The shock on her face had begun to shift towards something harder, a tightening around her eyes, a slight flush creeping up her neck. Recognition, then anger, then calculation flashed across her features in rapid succession. 20 minutes later, after presentations from our CFO and head of product development, I returned to center screen for closing remarks and questions. "Before we open for discussion," I said, "I'd like to address one important aspect of our new structure. As part of the merger, we'll be conducting a comprehensive review of all departments to identify areas of alignment and optimization. This will include evaluating leadership positions to ensure the right expertise is in place for our expanded focus." It was a standard corporate merger statement, but I saw Veronica flinch. She was savvy enough to understand what evaluating leadership positions often meant. "Now, I'll take questions from the executive team and department heads," I continued. scanning the grid of faces on my screen. Several hands raised virtually, and I called on our Chief Technology Officer first. His question about technology integration was straightforward and expected. The head of human resources followed with an inquiry about retention strategies. Then the director of global sales asked about client communication plans. Throughout these exchanges, Veronica remained silent, though I could see her mind working behind her carefully composed expression. She'd always been quick to adapt to changing circumstances, a skill that had served her well professionally. Veronica Lancaster, VP of Marketing, I acknowledged, seeing her hand raised. What's your question? Her voice was remarkably steady when she spoke. Thank you, Rebecca. Or should I say, Ms. Lancaster? I'm curious about the timing of this announcement and why our CEO has chosen to remain anonymous until now. It seems unusual for a company of our stature to have operated under such secretive leadership. The question was pointed, designed to undermine my credibility while establishing distance between us personally. Exactly what I would have expected from Veronica. A fair question, I replied calmly. Axion Capital has a history of acquiring companies and implementing strategic improvements before integrating them into our broader portfolio. My anonymity allowed Meridian to develop its own culture and identity without the shadow of its parent company. Now that we're ready for full integration, transparency is essential for alignment across all divisions. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. How fortunate for us to finally know who's been making the decisions all this time. I look forward to discussing how the marketing department can support this transition, perhaps in a more direct conversation. The challenge in her tone was unmistakable. I'll be scheduling individual meetings with all department heads next week, I responded evenly. Marketing's role will be crucial in communicating our new positioning. After a few more questions, I concluded the call with assurances that detailed information packages would be distributed immediately, followed by departmental briefings over the coming days. Thank you all for your continued dedication to excellence, I said in closing. Together, we're building something truly remarkable. As the call ended and faces began disappearing from my screen, Veronica lingered, her expression now carefully neutral. When only the executive team remained, she spoke again. Rebecca, might I have a word in private? Eliza raised an eyebrow, her protective instincts visible. We have the executive debriefing scheduled now, Veronica. Perhaps tomorrow would be better for department-level discussions. This won't take long, Veronica insisted, her professional smile firmly in place despite the tension evident in her shoulders. I nodded to Eliza. It's fine. Please start the debriefing without me. I'll join in 10 minutes. When the others had left the call, leaving just Veronica and me, the façade dropped immediately. What the hell are you doing? She demanded, her voice low and intense. Is this some kind of joke? I assure you it's not, I replied. Everything I said on the call is accurate. I founded Axion Capital 6 years ago after leaving Morgan Stanley. We acquired a controlling interest in Meridian 3 years ago through private equity channels. And you never thought to mention this to your own sister? While watching me work my way up through the company that you apparently owned? There was genuine hurt beneath her anger, which surprised me. Would you have believed me if I had told you? Or would you have assumed I was exaggerating my accomplishments as you've always done? She flinched slightly. That's not fair. Isn't it? Just today you were mocking my car and offering charity because you assumed I was struggling financially. That was, she began, then stopped, recalibrating. You deliberately misled me. You let me talk about my work, my promotions, my initiatives, knowing the entire time that you were actually in control. I never misled you about my work, I countered. I told you I was consulting with tech companies on growth strategies. That was true, if understated. Understated? She scoffed. You're apparently a CEO and major investor worth, what exactly? Millions? Billions? And you've been pretending to be some struggling consultant while driving that ridiculous old car. and living in that modest apartment. I've never cared about displaying wealth the way you do, I said. And those choices had strategic advantages. Very few people know the full extent of Axion's holdings or my personal net worth. Veronica shook, her head incredulous. So this whole time, every time you let me lecture you about career stability or financial planning, you were what? Laughing at me behind my back? The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth to it. That wasn't my intention. Then, what was your intention, Rebecca? To humiliate me in front of the entire executive team? To blindside me during a family reunion? The timing of the merger announcement was determined weeks ago, I said, which was technically true, though I'd had flexibility in selecting the exact date. Don't insult my intelligence, she snapped. You could have given me a private heads up. You chose to let me find out alongside everyone else because you wanted to see my reaction. You wanted me to feel foolish. Again, there was enough truth in her assessment to make me uncomfortable. Had I become so focused on finally receiving recognition that I'd lost sight of basic compassion? Perhaps you're right, I admitted after a moment. The timing could have been handled differently. She seemed surprised by my concession. So what happens now? Am I supposed to just continue working for my little sister like nothing's changed? That depends on you, I said honestly. The merger will bring organizational changes across departments. Marketing will need strong leadership to develop our new brand identity and positioning. And you think I can't separate personal feelings from professional responsibilities? Can you? She held my gaze through the screen, her expression hardening into determination. I've worked too hard to build my career to walk away because of family drama. I delivered exceptional results before I knew you owned the company, and I'll continue to do so now. That's what I hoped you'd say, I told her. Your work has been exemplary, Veronica. That's not in question. A complicated mix of emotions crossed. Her face, pride, confusion, lingering anger, and something like reluctant respect. I need to process all this. We're going to have a longer conversation very soon. But right now I have a family reunion to return to, and somehow explain why I look like I've seen a ghost. I'll be there shortly myself, I reminded her. Aunt Elaine is expecting us both for dinner. Veronica laughed, though it held little humor. Well, this should be interesting. I don't suppose you've told any of the family about your secret identity. As a corporate tycoon? No, I admitted. Only you know, for now. Lucky me, she said dryly before ending the call. I sat back in the leather chair, adrenaline still coursing through my system. The revelation had gone more or less as I'd expected professionally. The board and executive team had accepted the news with appropriate corporate decorum. But Veronica's reaction had been more nuanced than I'd anticipated. The hurt beneath, her anger seemed genuine, which complicated my feelings about the entire situation. A message popped up on my screen from Eliza. Executive team is waiting for you in the debriefing. Everything okay with Hurricane Veronica? On my way, I replied, pushing aside personal considerations to focus on the business at hand. For the next 30 minutes, I discussed implementation details with my leadership team, addressing concerns, and reinforcing our strategic vision. Throughout, I found my thoughts repeatedly drifting to the family dinner awaiting me, and the sister who now viewed me through an entirely different lens. When the debriefing concluded, I closed my laptop and took a moment to collect myself. The professional triumph I'd anticipated felt hollow in the face of the personal complications it had created. Uncle Philip's earlier warning echoed in my mind. Some victories feel hollow once achieved. With a deep breath, I left the study and made my way back to the reunion. The evening sun cast long shadows across the lawn as I stepped onto the patio, where dinner was now fully underway. Conversation flowed around elegantly set tables, the catering staff moving efficiently between guests. I scanned the gathering, quickly locating Veronica at a table with Aunt Elaine and several cousins. She was speaking animatedly, gesturing with her fork, seemingly recovered from our confrontation. As if sensing my presence, she glanced up, our eyes meeting across the space. Something unreadable passed across her expression, before she deliberately returned to her conversation. "There you are." Uncle Philip appeared beside me, offering a glass of wine. "I was beginning to think you might have escaped through a window." "The thought crossed my mind," I admitted, accepting the drink. "I take it your call was eventful." Veronica returned looking rather shell-shocked before rallying impressively. I sipped the wine, unsure how much to reveal. "It was clarifying." He hummed thoughtfully. "And did this clarification bring you satisfaction?" The question made me pause. Had it? The moment of reveal, seeing Veronica's shock as her perception of our respective positions crumbled, had brought a brief flash of vindication. But it had faded quickly, replaced by something more complex. "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "Save me a seat," I told Uncle Philip. "I need to speak. With Aunt Elaine first." He nodded, studying me with those perceptive eyes. "Take your time. I suspect this evening will be memorable regardless." I made my way to our hostess, who was directing the catering staff with gentle efficiency. At 68, Aunt Elaine maintained the elegant poise that had made her a celebrated hostess in diplomatic circles during Uncle Gerald's career as an ambassador. While Philip had been the professional diplomat, Elaine had mastered the equally important art of social diplomacy. "Rebecca, dear," she smiled warmly as I approached. "Everything. Sorted with your work emergency?" "Yes, thank you. And I appreciate your understanding about the interruption." "Nonsense. These things happen." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Though between us, Veronica seemed quite affected by whatever happened on her call. She practically stumbled, back to the patio looking pale as a ghost. Is everything all right at that company of hers? The irony of her phrasing, that company of hers, wasn't lost on me. Meridian is going through some organizational changes. Veronica received some unexpected news. Nothing too serious, I hope? She seemed to recover quickly enough. Your sister has always been resilient that way. It's nothing she can't handle, I assured her, which was true enough. Whatever her faults, Veronica had never lacked adaptability. "Well, I've seated you between Uncle Philip and Cousin Martin," Aunt Elaine continued, gesturing toward a table near the stone fire pit where lanterns cast a warm glow against the deepening twilight. "Veronica's across the way with Gerald and the Thompsons." I thought some distance might be wise given the tension earlier. I smiled gratefully. "You've always had a talent for strategic seating arrangements. A skill honed over 40 years of navigating delicate diplomatic dinners," she replied with a wink. "Now go enjoy your meal. The chef has prepared Caroline's favorite salmon dish in her honor." The mention of my mother sent a pang through my chest. What would she have thought of today's revelation? Would she have approved of the way I'd handled things, or would she have counseled a gentler approach? As I settled into my seat beside Uncle Philip, I couldn't help glancing toward Veronica's table. She was engaged in conversation with our cousin Meredith, but I caught her gaze flicking regularly in my direction. The calculated casualness of her posture suggested she was working hard to appear unaffected. "So," Uncle Philip said as he passed, "me a basket of artisan bread. Are you going to tell me what happened, or shall I piece it together from the fascinating nonverbal exchange currently happening between you and your sister?" I buttered a slice of sourdough, buying time. "It's complicated." "Family matters usually are," he agreed. "But I've found that the longer a truth remains unspoken, the more power it gains. Some air might be beneficial, if not for the whole family, then at least for someone with a bit of perspective." He tapped his chest meaningfully. I considered his offer. Uncle Philip had always been a neutral party in Lancaster family dynamics, maintaining good relationships with everyone while avoiding taking sides. His diplomatic background made him an excellent confidant, discreet, balanced, and wise. "What do you know about Meridian Dynamics?" I asked quietly. "Your sister's employer? Technology company. Focus on sustainable innovation. Headquartered in Boston with offices globally, growing rapidly in recent years if business news is accurate." I nodded. "And what about Axion Capital?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "Private equity firm, specializing in tech investments. Founded by a somewhat reclusive former Wall Street analyst who's developed quite a reputation for identifying undervalued companies with strong growth potential. They've built an impressive portfolio of sustainable technology businesses." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Why do you ask?" "Because I founded Axion Capital 6 years ago," I said simply. "And 3 years ago, we acquired a controlling interest in Meridian Dynamics." Uncle Philip's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down deliberately, processing this information with remarkable composure. "You're the reclusive founder the financial press occasionally mentions?" "I am." "And Veronica has been working for a company you own without knowing it?" "Until about 40 minutes ago, yes." He whistled softly. "That explains her rather dramatic return to the party. How did she take the news?" "About as well as you'd expect," I said dryly. "Shock, followed by anger, followed by accusations that I deliberately humiliated her." "Did you?" His question held no judgment, only curiosity. The directness of his inquiry made me pause. Had I orchestrated today's revelation specifically to humiliate Veronica? The timing of the merger announcement had been flexible. I could have told her privately beforehand. I could have revealed my ownership of Meridian at any point over the past 3 years. "Not intentionally," I said finally. "At least that wasn't my primary motivation." "But perhaps a secondary one?" he suggested gently. I sighed, poking at my salmon. "I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in finally being recognized for my achievements after years of her condescension." Uncle Philip nodded thoughtfully. "Understandable. Veronica has always had a talent for making her accomplishments known while diminishing others, a trait she unfortunately inherited from your father." The comparison to our father struck me. Samuel Lancaster had built a successful investment firm through relentless ambition and self-promotion, often at others' expense. His praise had been conditional, based on achievements he valued, primarily financial success and social status. Veronica had molded herself to earn his approval, while I'd eventually chosen a different path. "The irony," I said quietly, "is that I've become successful by Dad's metrics, perhaps even more so than Veronica. But I've kept it private. I wanted recognition for the substance of my work, not just the wealth it generated." "A commendable philosophy," Uncle Philip nodded. "Though I wonder if concealing your success from family served that purpose, or perhaps created complications of its own." Before I could respond, a tinkling sound cut through the dinner conversation, as Aunt Elaine gently tapped her crystal glass with a spoon. "Before we continue with dessert," she announced, "I thought we might share some favorite memories of Caroline, since this is our first reunion without her. Who would like to begin?" Several family members offered warm recollections. Caroline's legendary Christmas cookies, her talent for resolving family disputes, her infectious laugh. Each story resonated with genuine affection for my mother, who had been the family's emotional center for decades. "I remember how Mom always made time for each of us individually," Veronica said when her turn came. Her voice carried a sincerity I rarely heard from her. No matter how busy she was with community work or family obligations, she had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in her world when she was with you. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. My mother had indeed possessed that rare gift of complete presence. "Rebecca?" Aunt Elaine prompted gently. "Would you like to share a memory?" All eyes turned to me, including Veronica's. Despite the tension between us, I saw a flicker of shared grief in her expression. Mom taught me the value of quiet strength, I said, the words coming more easily than I'd expected. She showed me that you don't always need to be the loudest voice in the room to have impact. She used to tell me that true influence isn't about demanding attention, but about creating something so meaningful that attention naturally follows. My gaze inadvertently met Veronica's across the tables. Something shifted in her expression, a flash of recognition, perhaps even understanding. She also, I continued, believed fiercely in second chances and the capacity for people to grow. We're all works in progress, she used to say. Even in her final days, she spoke about the importance of leaving room for people to surprise you. The gathering fell silent for a moment, absorbing my words. Aunt Elaine dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin. Your mother would be proud of both her daughters, she said finally. Different as you may be, you each carry pieces of her remarkable spirit. As conversations resumed and servers began distributing dessert, a delicate lemon tart that had been my mother's signature recipe, I noticed Veronica excusing herself from her table. Instead of heading toward the house, she walked toward the lake, her silhouette gradually dissolving into the gathering darkness. Perhaps, Uncle Philip suggested quietly, this might be a good moment for that longer conversation she mentioned. I hesitated, torn between the impulse to follow her and the fear of another confrontation. What would you do? I'd remember that. Beneath all your professional accomplishments and her corporate success, your sister's first, he said. And your mother's dearest wish was for that relationship to heal. The reminder of my promise to my mother decided me. I stood, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten dessert. Save me some tart? Uncle Philip smiled. I make no promises. Your aunt's lemon tart disappears quickly in this crowd. I followed the stone path that led from the patio down toward the lake. The evening had cooled, and I wished I'd brought a shawl as a slight breeze rippled across the water. Fairy lights strung along the dock provided just enough illumination to see Veronica sitting at the end, her bare feet dangling above the dark water. She didn't turn as I approached, though she must have heard my footsteps on the wooden planks. I paused a few feet away, suddenly uncertain. I used to be so jealous of how easily Mom connected with you, Veronica said without looking up. You two spoke the same language somehow. The unexpected confession caught me off guard. I could have said the same about you and Dad. Fair point. She glanced sideways at me. Though I worked incredibly hard for his approval, it never came as naturally as your bond with Mom. I sat down beside her, leaving careful space between us. Nothing about Dad's approval was natural. It had to be earned repeatedly, measured against constantly shifting expectations. True, she conceded, but I got very good at earning it. You did, I agreed. I admired that, you know. Your determination, your resilience. She looked at me, fully now, surprise evident in her expression. You did? Of course. You set a goal and pursued it relentlessly. That's an impressive quality. Even when the goal was questionable? She asked wryly. Like making vice president at a company my sister secretly owned? Despite everything, I found myself smiling. The goal itself wasn't questionable. Your marketing strategies have genuinely strengthened Meridian's market position. She shook her head, but I caught the ghost of a smile. I still can't believe you sat through all those family dinners listening to me boast about my promotions while knowing you could fire me with a single email. I wouldn't have, I said seriously. Your work has always spoken for itself. Veronica sighed, turning back toward the water where moonlight now created a silver pathway across the rippling surface. So what happens now? Professionally or personally? I asked, watching the moonlight dance across the lake's surface. Both, I suppose. Veronica drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. A defensive posture I remembered from our childhood, when she felt vulnerable but was trying not to show it. Professionally, the merger moves forward, I explained. Your role as VP of Marketing will be evaluated like all leadership positions, but your performance record speaks for itself. You've consistently delivered exceptional results. She looked at me skeptically. You wouldn't demote me out of personal considerations? I've managed to keep my personal feelings separate from business decisions for 3 years, I reminded her. Why would that change now? Because now I know. The power dynamic is out in the open. I considered this. I suppose that's fair, but I built Axion's reputation on making sound strategic choices, not indulging personal vendettas. Your marketing expertise will be valuable during the transition, more valuable than any satisfaction I might get from demoting you. How coldly pragmatic, she remarked, though without real bite. I learned from watching Dad, I said, though I've tried to add some humanity to the equation. We sat in silence for a moment, the gentle lapping of water against the dock pilings, the only sound between us. And personally? Veronica finally asked, her voice softer than before. The question was more difficult to answer. Our relationship had been strained for so long, complicated by competition, resentment, and fundamentally different values. Could we move past that? Did we even want to? I don't know, I admitted. We've spent so many years defining ourselves in opposition to each other. You were the ambitious corporate success. I was the unfocused dreamer. You were Dad's favorite. I was Mom's. You displayed your achievements. I hid mine. And now those neat categories have collapsed, she observed. Exactly. I'm not who you thought. I was. And maybe... I hesitated. Maybe I'm not entirely who you thought I was either. She finished. I nodded, surprised by her self-awareness. For what it's worth, Veronica said after a moment, I didn't enjoy the way Dad pitted us against each other. I know I played into it. Probably more than you did. Success was the only language he understood, and I desperately wanted his approval. We all did, I acknowledged. I just eventually decided the cost was too high. And then you went and became more successful than either of us could have imagined, without telling anyone. There was a trace of hurt in her voice. Why the secrecy, Becca? Really? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself many times. Initially, it was strategic. Anonymity gave me freedom to operate without scrutiny. The mysterious founder narrative became useful for Axion's brand, but with family, I searched for the right words. I guess I was afraid. Of what? That we wouldn't believe you? Partly. But also that nothing would change. That even with objective proof of my success, you and Dad would still find ways to minimize it. That it would never be enough. Veronica was quiet for so long I wondered if she'd even respond. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Success meant something different to Dad than it does to you. For him, it wasn't real unless people knew about it, unless it garnered recognition and envy. The quiet impact you've been making, building something meaningful without publicity, he wouldn't have understood that. And you? I asked. Do you understand it? She sighed, raking her fingers through her perfectly styled hair in a rare gesture of abandon. I'm trying to. It challenges everything I've built my identity around. The idea that true success might not require constant external validation is uncomfortable for me. Her honesty surprised me. Veronica had always projected absolute confidence in her choices and values. If it helps, I offered, I'm also questioning some of my choices. Keeping my work secret from family was protective, at first, but eventually it became a wall. Maybe even a weapon. A weapon? Knowledge is power, I explained. Knowing something about you that you didn't know about me created an imbalance I could control. That's not something I'm particularly proud of. Veronica nodded slowly. I understand that better than you might think. There's a certain power in being the successful sister, too. I probably leaned into that role more than necessary. The admission hung between us. Not quite an apology, but the closest we'd come to mutual acknowledgement of our complicated dynamic. From the direction of the house, we heard laughter and the tinkling of glasses. The reunion continued without us, yet it felt as though we were having our own private reunion here on the dock, perhaps the first genuine connection we'd shared in years. Remember when we used to swim out to the floating dock at night? Veronica asked suddenly, pointing toward a distant platform barely visible in the moonlight. Mom would have had a heart attack if she'd known. I smiled at the memory. You always went first to make sure it was safe for me, even though you were terrified of what might be in the water at night. I wasn't terrified, she protested automatically, then chuckled. Okay, maybe a little. But I was the big sister. It was my job to go first. You took that responsibility very seriously back then, I noted. You were actually quite protective of me when we were little. Before Dad's expectations and society's definitions of success got between us, she said quietly. Before we let them get between us, I corrected gently. Veronica dipped her toes in the cool water, creating ripples that expanded in perfect circles. Do you think we can get past all this? The competition? The resentment? The history? I don't know. I answered honestly, but Mom would want us to try. She made me promise, Veronica said, surprising me again. In the hospital, near the end, she made me promise to try to understand you better, to see beyond my own perspective. She asked the same of me, I admitted. To remember that, beneath your confidence was someone seeking validation, just like everyone else. Veronica looked vaguely offended, then laughed softly. Typical Mom, seeing right through our defenses. She always could. A comfortable silence settled between us as we contemplated our mother's final wisdom, her attempt to bridge the gap between her daughters even after she was gone. So, Veronica said finally, you're really a big-shot CEO with your own investment firm? I smiled at her phrasing. I am. And you choose to drive that awful Honda and live in that modest townhouse in Cambridge? You could afford any car, any house you wanted. The Honda is practical and reliable, I defended. And I like my townhouse. It's close to my favorite bookstore and the best coffee shop in the city. She shook her head, but with something almost like fondness. Some things about you haven't changed, at least. Still making decisions based on books and coffee rather than status. And you still care what other people think more than what actually works for you, I countered without heat. Touché. She hesitated, then asked, just how successful is Axion exactly, if you don't mind me asking? I considered how to answer. Veronica had always measured value in concrete terms, numbers, rankings, tangible metrics. As of last quarter, Axion manages assets of approximately $11 billion, I said. The merger with Meridian will increase that by another $2 billion in enterprise value. Forbes included me in their 40 under 40 list last year, though they used a silhouette since I've avoided publicity photos. Veronica's eyes widened. 11 billion? That's significantly more than I imagined. The sustainable technology sector has seen exponential growth, I explained. We positioned ourselves early and made some key acquisitions at the right time. Including Meridian, she noted. Including Meridian, I confirmed, which was struggling with outdated management and vision before we stepped in. Your sustainability initiative, by the way, was exactly the direction the company needed. You saw that opportunity before anyone else. She seemed surprised by the compliment. You really think so? I approved the budget expansion for it personally, I told her. When your proposal reached the executive level, I recognized its potential immediately. That wasn't favoritism, it was good business. A small, genuine smile spread across her face. Not the polished professional expression she usually wore, but something more reminiscent of the sister I'd known in childhood. Well, she said, smoothing her dress as she stood up, this will certainly make future family reunions more interesting. I rose beside her, brushing off my slacks. I suppose I'll have to endure a barrage of questions once the family finds out. If they find out, Veronica said with a raised eyebrow. Unless you're planning another dramatic revelation tonight? I think one per day is my limit, I replied dryly. Though eventually I'll need to tell Aunt Elaine at least. She's been worried about my financial future for years. Veronica laughed, a genuine laugh that I hadn't heard from her in ages. I can just imagine her face. All this time we've been worried about poor Rebecca, and she's been secretly richer than all of us combined. Her impression of our aunt was so spot on that I couldn't help laughing too. For a brief moment, the years of tension seemed to evaporate, and we were just sisters sharing a joke. As our laughter subsided, Veronica's expression grew more serious. I owe you an apology, Rebecca, for today, with the car comments, but also for a lot of things over the years. The admission clearly didn't come easily to her. Veronica had never been comfortable acknowledging mistakes or shortcomings. I appreciate that, I said simply, not wanting to diminish the moment with platitudes. She nodded, understanding my restraint. We should head back before they send a search party. Aunt Elaine hates missing anyone for her famous after-dinner charades. As we walked side by side along the dock, Veronica asked, "So what's next for the mysterious founder of Axion Capital, now that your identity will be public knowledge in the business world?" "Expanding our renewable energy initiatives, primarily," I replied. "The technology we've been developing at Meridian, combined with Axion's resources, could accelerate clean energy adoption significantly." "Always the idealist," she remarked, but without the dismissive tone she would have used hours earlier. "Idealism with pragmatic execution," I corrected. "The most powerful combination I know." As we approached the house, the sounds of the family reunion grew louder. Laughter, conversation, the clinking of glasses. Before we rejoined the gathering, Veronica paused, turning to face me directly. "Just so you know," she said with unexpected sincerity. "Despite how it might have seemed, I am proud of what you've accomplished, Becca, even if I'm still processing how you accomplished it." The admission touched me more deeply than I expected. "That means a lot, coming from you." She nodded once, then straightened her shoulders and adopted her usual poised expression as we stepped back into the light of the patio, where our family awaited. Unaware that the dynamic between the Lancaster sisters had fundamentally shifted in ways that would ripple through many reunions to come. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of family charades, dessert, and conversations that now seemed trivial compared to what had transpired between Veronica and me. I found myself watching her across the patio, noting the subtle shifts in her behavior. She was still confident, still commanding attention when she spoke. But there was a new awareness in the glances she occasionally directed my way, an acknowledgement of our shared secret. By the time guests began departing around 11, the emotional exhaustion of the day had caught up with me. I said my goodbyes to departing relatives, promising to visit more frequently than my usual once-a-year appearance at family gatherings. "You're welcome to stay the night," Aunt Elaine offered as I collected my purse and the now empty cake carrier. "Several others are. The guest rooms are all prepared." "Thank you, but I should get back to the city," I declined gently. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." "On a Sunday?" she asked, concerned. "You work too hard, dear. Life isn't all about career." "You know," I suppressed a smile at the irony of her worry. "I promise it's important. Merger details that can't wait." "If you're sure." She hugged me warmly. "Drive safely in that practical car of yours." Her slight hesitation made me wonder if Veronica had said something, but Aunt Elaine's expression remained innocently concerned. I returned her hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her Chanel perfume, the same one she'd worn for as long as I could remember. "Thank you for bringing us all together," I told her sincerely. Mom would have loved today. She would have, Aunt Elaine agreed, her eyes misting slightly, especially seeing her girls talking instead of avoiding each other. Whatever you discussed down by the lake, I'm grateful for it. I nodded, not quite ready to share the full extent of our conversation. We're working on it. As I stepped outside, into the cool night air, I found Uncle Philip waiting beside my Honda, a knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Not even going to offer to call you a car service?" he asked, gesturing toward my vehicle. "Now that we know you could buy an entire fleet?" I laughed softly. "Veronica told you. She might have mentioned something about her little sister being a secret billionaire," he confirmed. "After swearing me to absolute secrecy, of course." "I'm not quite a billionaire," I corrected. "Mere technicalities." He waved dismissively. "The point is, you've been living a double life worthy of a spy novel, and I find it absolutely fascinating." I leaned against the Honda's fender, suddenly not quite ready to leave. "Are you disappointed I didn't tell you sooner?" Uncle Philip considered this seriously. "Not disappointed, no. People have their reasons for the secrets they keep. I'm simply curious about what happens next." Professionally, the merger proceeds. Personally, I shrugged. Veronica and I have taken a small step toward understanding each other better. It's a start. "Indeed it is," he agreed. "Though I suspect the family dynamics will become considerably more interesting once your success becomes common knowledge." "Your cousin Martin nearly choked on his wine when Veronica whispered something to him after your dock conversation," I groaned. "So much for absolute secrecy." "The Lancaster family grapevine is remarkably efficient," he said with amusement. Though in fairness to Veronica, she seemed to be trying to prepare key family members rather than simply gossiping. I believe her exact words to me were, "Uncle Philip, you won't believe what I just learned about Rebecca, and you'll need to help me manage the family reaction when it gets out." This consideration from Veronica surprised me. That was thoughtful of her. "Your sister has depths that might surprise you," he observed. "Just as you clearly had depths that surprised her." "We've both had our reasons for the masks we wear," I acknowledged. "The question is whether you'll continue to wear them," Uncle Philip said, his tone shifting to the gentle seriousness that had made him an excellent diplomat. "Success achieved in secrecy serves its purpose, but at what cost to authentic relationships?" The question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. My professional anonymity had made strategic sense, but extending that secrecy to family and friends had created a distance I was only now beginning to fully recognize. "I'm still figuring that out," I said honestly. He nodded, accepting my uncertainty. "Well, when you do figure it out, your aunt and I would love to hear more about this empire you've built. Perhaps over dinner sometime? Without the entire extended family present?" "I'd like that," I agreed, surprisingly touched by his interest. Hugged him goodbye and slid into my much-maligned Honda, watching in the rearview mirror as he returned to the warmly lit house. As I pulled away from Aunt Elaine's estate, my phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Veronica. "Drive safely. We should talk more tomorrow. Breakfast at Rosewood at 9? The Rosewood was an upscale hotel in Boston with a renowned Sunday brunch. It was exactly the kind of place Veronica would choose. Elegant, exclusive, and exceedingly expensive. 6 hours ago, I would have interpreted her suggestion as another opportunity to flaunt her success. Now, I wasn't so sure. I pulled over to respond. "See you at 9. After a moment's hesitation, I added, "I'll try not to embarrass you by arriving in my Honda." Her reply came quickly. "Park it with the valet. Their expressions alone will be worth the exorbitant tip they'll expect from you afterward." I smiled despite myself. It wasn't quite a joke, but it wasn't quite a criticism either. More an acknowledgement of our different approaches to wealth and status. The drive back to Cambridge gave me time to process the day's events. The merger announcement had gone exactly as planned professionally. Eliza had messaged that initial market response was overwhelmingly positive, with analysts already predicting significant growth potential for the combined entity. But the personal ramifications, the shift in my relationship with Veronica, the impending changes to family dynamics once my success became widely known, were harder to anticipate or control. By the time I reached my townhouse, it was past midnight. Despite the hour, lights glowed from my neighbor's window. Mrs. Chen, an 80-year-old retired literature professor who kept notoriously late hours. As I gathered my things from the car, she appeared on her front step in a silk robe, a steaming mug in her hands. "Late night, Rebecca," she called softly. Or should I say, Ms. Mysterious CEO? I froze, keys in hand. "I'm sorry?" She chuckled, the sound carrying in the quiet street. "The Wall Street Journal called earlier. A very persistent young man wanting to confirm that Rebecca Lancaster, founder of Axion Capital, lives at this address. I told him he must be mistaken. The Rebecca Lancaster I know drives a modest Honda and waters my plants when I visit my grandchildren." My heart sank. The news was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. "Mrs. Chen, Don't worry, dear." She waved dismissively. "I told him he had the wrong Rebecca Lancaster. But I suspected there was more to you than met the eye. No one reads financial theory at the park bench for pleasure unless they have skin in the game." I smiled sheepishly, recalling our conversations about economic philosophy during shared afternoons in the neighborhood park. Mrs. Chen had always been perceptive, and apparently more aware of financial news than I'd realized. "Thank you for protecting my privacy," I said sincerely. "Of course. But you might want to prepare yourself," she advised. "Once these things start, they tend to snowball. Your quiet days may be numbered." She was right, of course. The carefully maintained separation between my professional achievements and personal life was collapsing rapidly. By morning, business publications would be running stories on the revealed identity of Axion's founder, complete with whatever photos their researchers could unearth. Financial analysts would be speculating about the implications for Axion's future and the merged company's prospects. And Veronica. Veronica would be processing what it meant to discover her younger sister was not only her employer, but a recognized force in the very business world where she'd built her identity. Inside my townhouse, I moved through familiar routines on autopilot, hanging up my jacket, checking mail, filling the kettle for tea. The space felt different somehow, as if the revelation of my professional identity had altered even my relationship with my home. For years, this modest townhouse had been both refuge and disguise, a place where I could simply be Rebecca without the complications of being the founder of Axion. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Eliza. Despite the late hour, I answered immediately. "The news is spreading," she said without preamble. "Business Insider just published a profile piecing together your background. Forbes is updating their 40 under 40 entry with an actual photo they found from your Morgan Stanley days. The merger announcement was expected, but your identity reveal has caught significant attention." "I expected as much," I sighed, sinking onto my couch. "How's the team handling it?" "Professionally," she assured me. Though James couldn't resist mentioning that Veronica's reaction at the reunion must have been priceless. His exact words. I winced. "Has anyone reached out to her directly?" "Not yet, but they will. As the most visible executive at Meridian, who also happens to be your sister, she'll be a natural target for inquiries." "Have you prepared her for that?" "We're meeting for breakfast tomorrow," I said. "I'll make sure she's ready." After ending the call, I sat in the quiet of my living room, thinking about the conversation awaiting me in the morning. Veronica and I had taken tentative steps toward reconciliation, but navigating this new public dimension would test our fragile progress. My phone chimed with another message, this time from Uncle Philip. "Just saw the Business Insider article. Your quiet revelation tonight seems to have become considerably less quiet. Call if you need any damage control advice from an old diplomat. I smiled at his offer, appreciating the support even as I wondered what damage might need controlling. The merger itself was sound business strategy. My identity becoming public was inevitable and strategically timed. The only real variable was how these developments would affect my personal relationships, particularly with Veronica. As if conjured by my thoughts, another message appeared on my screen. Media calling already. We definitely need to talk in. The morning. Still on for 9? I replied quickly. Absolutely, I'll be there. Setting my phone aside, I moved to the window overlooking the quiet street. Mrs. Chen's lights had gone out, and the neighborhood was still, unaware that one of its residents had just been thrust into a spotlight she'd deliberately avoided for years. Tomorrow would bring questions, adjustments, and complications I'd prepared for professionally, but not entirely personally. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd concealed my success while Veronica flaunted hers. Now that our positions were revealed to be quite different than anyone had imagined, we would both need to recalibrate, finding new ways to define ourselves and our relationship, when the old categories no longer applied. As I finally prepared for bed, I found myself wondering what my mother would make of all this. Caroline Lancaster had always seen through the personas her daughters presented to the world, recognizing both Veronica's hidden insecurities and my concealed ambitions. Perhaps she'd known all along that someday the truth would emerge. That, eventually, we would have to see each other clearly, without the distortions of competition and assumed roles. With that thought, I drifted off to sleep, mentally preparing for a breakfast conversation that would determine whether today's revelation would ultimately bridge or widen the gap between two sisters who had spent far too long defining themselves in opposition to each other. The Rosewood Hotel's restaurant exuded exactly the kind of refined luxury that Veronica had always gravitated toward: soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers, impeccable white tablecloths, and discreetly attentive staff who seemed to anticipate guests' needs before they arose. I arrived 5 minutes early, having decided against my usual Honda in favor of a rideshare to avoid the media attention that Mrs. Chen had warned about. The maitre d' recognized me immediately, a new experience that confirmed my changed public status. "Ms. Lancaster," he greeted with a deferential nod. "Your sister is already seated. Please follow me." Heads turned subtly as I was led through the dining room. A few diners whispered behind menus, their gazes following my progress. The business. Insider article must have included a recent photo after all. Veronica sat at a corner table with excellent views of both the Boston Public Garden and the restaurant's elegant interior. She'd positioned herself facing the entrance, a power move straight from her corporate playbook, but rose when she saw me approach, an uncharacteristic gesture that hinted at our shifted dynamic. "Right on time," she noted, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I took the liberty of ordering mimosas. I figured we could both use one after yesterday." "Good call," I agreed, settling into my seat. "Though it's hardly the most challenging conversation we'll have today." A server appeared silently at my elbow, pouring fresh orange juice and champagne into a flute before disappearing again with "Practice discretion." "So," Veronica began, lifting her glass. "To revelations?" I clinked my glass against hers. "To new beginnings, maybe?" She nodded thoughtfully before taking a sip. "New beginnings, then." After a moment, she added, "Though, I have to say, your particular revelation has created quite the stir. I've had 17 media inquiries since last night, not to mention calls from pretty much every executive at Meridian wanting to know if I had advanced knowledge of my sister's ownership." "And did you tell them you were as surprised as anyone?" I asked. "I haven't told them anything yet," she replied. "I wanted to coordinate our responses. The communications team at Meridian is in chaos, by the way." Apparently, finding out their reclusive owner is not only going public, but is also the sister of their marketing VP, has thrown their carefully prepared merger messaging into disarray. I winced slightly. I should have better prepared them for the personal angle. You think? Veronica raised an eyebrow, but her tone held more wry amusement than criticism. Though I suppose no press release could adequately capture. Surprise. The sister you've been condescending to at family gatherings actually owns your company. Despite the tension of the situation, I found myself smiling. Not exactly standard corporate communications. Veronica's answering smile suggested we might actually navigate this breakfast without reopening last night's emotional wounds. She tapped her phone, which lay face up beside her plate. 17. Media inquiries have become 23. The Wall Street Journal wants an exclusive interview with both of us. The sister CEO's angle is apparently irresistible. We're not both CEOs, I pointed out. Not yet, she agreed, a hint of her old competitive edge surfacing. But VP to CEO isn't an insurmountable leap, especially with the right connections. The comment hung between us, its implications clear. Was she suggesting I might promote her as a form of nepotism? Or was this Veronica's way of acknowledging my position while maintaining her ambitions? Before I could respond, she continued, Don't worry, I'm not asking for special treatment. If anything, I'd expect you to be harder on me than others to avoid any appearance of favoritism. That's been my approach for 3 years, I reminded her. Your promotions were earned on merit. She studied me over the rim of her glass. And yet you allowed me to take credit for the sustainability initiative that you actually approved. You developed the concept and implementation strategy, I countered. My approval was based on the strength of your proposal, not our relationship. A server approached with menus, but Veronica waved him away with a polite smile. We'll need a few more minutes. Once he'd retreated, she leaned forward. Okay, let's get practical. How do we handle this publicly? The sister angle changes the entire narrative around the merger. I appreciated her shift to problem-solving mode. This was Veronica at her most effective, focusing on strategy rather than emotion. We acknowledge it straightforwardly, I suggested. Yes, we're sisters. No, you didn't know I owned the company. Yes, it creates an unusual dynamic, but we're both professionals committed to the company's success. And privately, she pressed. Half the family knows by now, thanks to my indiscretion last night. Aunt Elaine called at 7 this morning, full of questions about why her supposedly struggling niece has been hiding her success. What did you tell her? That she should ask you directly, but that she shouldn't believe everything she reads. Veronica replied. I figured you deserved to tell your own story. The consideration touched me. Thank you for that. Don't thank me yet, she warned. The family dynamics are about to get complicated in entirely new ways. Cousin Martin has already called to pitch his real estate development, assuming you're looking for investment opportunities. I groaned. That didn't take long. It never does with Martin. Veronica signaled for the server, and this time accepted the menus he offered. We should order before this gets any more intense. The crab Benedict is exceptional here. We paused our conversation to select our meals. The recommended Benedict for Veronica. Avocado toast with poached eggs for me. Once the server had departed, Veronica retrieved a tablet from her designer handbag and slid it across the table. I've drafted a joint statement for us, she explained. Marketing is my domain, after all, and getting ahead of this narrative is crucial for both Meridian and Axion. I scanned the document, impressed despite myself. Veronica had crafted a statement that acknowledged our relationship while emphasizing the professional integrity of both companies. It highlighted the strategic benefits of the merger without dwelling on the personal revelation and redirected focus to the innovative technology the combined entity would develop. This is excellent, I admitted, looking up from the tablet. Though, you've positioned yourself rather prominently in the Meridian narrative, she shrugged, unapologetic. I've earned that position. And frankly, my higher profile at Meridian gives us an advantage now. The media already knows me. I've been the public face of several major initiatives. Using that familiarity creates continuity during the transition. Her assessment was strategically sound, if self-serving. Make these revisions, I suggested, noting several points where the language needed adjustment. And I'll approve it for release this afternoon. Veronica made the changes efficiently, her fingers flying across the tablet's keyboard. As she worked, I observed her in this professional element, focused, competent, and genuinely in her wheelhouse. For all our differences, Veronica's marketing instincts were exceptional. There, she said, passing the tablet back. Revisions incorporated. I've also drafted talking points for both of us to ensure our messaging remains consistent across interviews. I reviewed her work again, finding little to criticize. This is why you've advanced so quickly at Meridian, I noted. Your strategic communication skills are impressive. She accepted the compliment with a nod, but I caught a flicker of genuine pleasure in her expression. Had my professional approval always mattered to her more than I'd realized? Our breakfast arrived, temporarily shifting our attention to the perfectly prepared food. We ate in companionable silence for several minutes before Veronica spoke again. You know what's ironic? She said, setting down her fork. After years of competing, we've ended up with complementary strengths. Your vision and investment acumen, my marketing and public relations expertise, we could actually make a formidable team. The observation surprised me, both its insight and the implied suggestion of collaboration rather than competition. That's what Mom always said, I replied. Remember how she used to tell us we'd be unstoppable if we worked together instead of against each other? I thought she was just trying to get us to stop fighting, Veronica admitted with a small smile. But maybe she saw something we didn't. Our conversation paused as Veronica's phone rang, a call from Meridian's communications director that she apologetically needed to take. As she stepped away from the table to speak privately, I found myself contemplating the possibility she'd raised. Could we actually work together effectively? The past 24 hours had revealed depths to Veronica I hadn't acknowledged, and capabilities I hadn't fully appreciated. When she returned to the table, her expression was focused, but excited. The media requests are multiplying. Bloomberg, CNBC, and Forbes all want interviews, with both of us, preferably together. And the board is calling an emergency meeting for this afternoon. That's expected, I assured her. They're processing a significant shift in their understanding of the company's ownership and direction. Will you attend in person? She asked. I nodded. It's time. The merger announcement was always intended to be the moment I stepped fully into public view. Why now? Veronica asked, her tone genuinely curious rather than challenging. After 3 years of anonymity, why choose this moment to reveal yourself? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly over the past months as I'd planned this transition. The sustainable energy initiatives we've been developing at both Meridian and Axion are reaching critical implementation stages, I explained. The public-private partnerships we're establishing require a more visible leadership presence. And personally, I hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. Personally, I've reached a point where the strategic benefits of anonymity are outweighed by its limitations. Such as? She prompted. Such as not being able to fully advocate for the causes I believe in, not being recognized for the work I'm most proud of, living divided between my professional achievements and personal relationships. Veronica studied me thoughtfully. So it wasn't about the dramatic reveal at the family reunion? That was... I searched for the right words. An unplanned convergence of timing. The merger announcement date was set weeks ago based on market conditions and investor relations strategy. It coinciding with Aunt Elaine's reunion was coincidental, though I won't deny a certain poetic justice in the moment. Poetic justice. Veronica repeated, a hint of her old edge returning. Because I deserve to be publicly embarrassed for underestimating you all these years? I met her gaze directly. Because we both deserve the opportunity to see each other clearly, without the distortions of old assumptions. Would you have truly heard me if I'd simply told you about Axion privately? She considered this, then shook her head reluctantly. Probably not. I'd have assumed you were exaggerating or would have found some way to diminish it. Old habits die hard. Exactly, I agreed. Sometimes clarity requires a moment of undeniable truth. Our server approached to refill our coffee cups and inquire about dessert, which we both declined. We should finalize this statement, Veronica said, returning to practical matters as she picked up the tablet. The communications team will need it within the hour if we want to control today's narrative. As we made the final adjustments to our joint statement, I found myself appreciating the unexpected partnership forming between us. For the first time in our adult lives, we were working together toward a shared goal, rather than positioning ourselves in opposition to each other. When the check arrived, Veronica reached for it automatically, a habitual gesture from years of assuming she was the financially successful sister. She caught herself mid-motion and looked up with a self-deprecating smile. Old habits again, she said, withdrawing her hand. I suppose it's your turn to pick up the check for the next several decades. I took the leather folder, inserting my credit card. Or we could simply take turns, like normal adult siblings who respect each other's contributions. Veronica raised her coffee cup in a small toast. To normal adult siblings, then. However unfamiliar that territory might be for the Lancaster sisters. 6 months after the revelation that transformed both our professional and personal landscapes, I stood at the window of my new office on the 40th floor of the Meridian Axion Global Headquarters. The Boston skyline stretched before me, buildings glinting in the late afternoon sunlight. Behind me, the executive boardroom was being prepared for a milestone celebration, our first quarter results since the completed merger, exceeding even our most optimistic projections. My phone buzzed, with a message from Eliza. Financial Times reporter in the lobby. Says you promised him 5 minutes before the event. I texted back, send him up. I'll meet him in the visitor reception area. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of transitions, professional, personal, and public. The sister CEO's narrative, as the business press had dubbed it, despite the fact that Veronica was still technically a VP, had captured significant media attention. Our joint statement had helped shape the initial coverage, but the storyline had taken on a life of its own, developing from business news into something approaching business folklore. 2 sisters with vastly different styles, one building quietly, in the shadows, the other climbing visibly through corporate ranks, unknowingly working for the same company until a dramatic revelation at a family reunion. It had all the elements of a compelling narrative, and the business media had been unable to resist. What the press didn't fully capture, however, was the more nuanced evolution happening beneath the headlines. Veronica and I were navigating a fundamentally transformed relationship, one where old patterns of competition were giving way to an unexpected collaboration that drew on our complementary strengths. As I headed toward the reception area, I passed Veronica's office. She was on a video call, gesturing animatedly as she presented what appeared to be marketing projections to an international team. She caught my eye through the glass wall and held up one finger, a request for a moment once she finished. Financial Times reporter was young and eager, notebook in hand despite the digital recorder he also carried. Ms. Lancaster, thank you for making time. Just a few quick questions before your announcement. Of course, I smiled, now accustomed to these brief press interactions that had become part of my daily routine. Your first quarterly results, post-merger, are reportedly exceptional. Analysts are suggesting a 28% increase in sustainable energy contracts alone. What do you attribute this success to? The combined expertise and resources of our merged companies have accelerated implementation timelines. Significantly, I explained. But more importantly, our integrated approach to market solutions has resonated with clients looking for comprehensive sustainability partners rather than piecemeal service providers. He nodded, scribbling notes. And working alongside your sister, has that presented unique challenges or advantages? The sister angle, still the hook that journalists found irresistible. Both, I acknowledged candidly. We bring different perspectives and skills to the table, which creates a more robust decision-making process. And while we don't always agree on approach, we've found that our different viewpoints often lead to better outcomes than either of us would reach independently. The business world has been fascinated by your contrasting styles, he pressed. You building your success privately while your sister pursued a more conventional, visible corporate path. Has working together changed either of your approaches? Before I could respond, Veronica appeared beside me, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my entire monthly wardrobe budget. Some things hadn't changed. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said smoothly. But I thought I might save my sister from answering yet another question about our working relationship. The reporter looked delighted at the unexpected addition to his interview. Ms. Lancaster, the other Ms. Lancaster, your perspective would be valuable, Veronica smiled with practiced charm. Success isn't about style, it's about results. My sister and I may have taken different paths, but what matters is where those paths have led. To a company that's redefining sustainable technology implementation globally. So no more sibling rivalry? He asked hopefully. Veronica and I exchanged glances, a loaded question with a complicated answer. We've found a more productive channel for our competitive instincts, I offered diplomatically. Rebecca excels at some things, I excel at others, Veronica added. The company benefits from both. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have an announcement to prepare for. As we walked away, leaving the slightly disappointed reporter with less dramatic quotes than he'd hoped for, Veronica whispered. Another sister question. Do they ever get tired of that angle? Apparently not, I replied. Though your answer was perfect. Marketing is my specialty, she reminded me with a small smile. Speaking of which, the quarterly announcement materials are ready for your final review. We entered the boardroom where the executive team was gathering. The atmosphere was celebratory, champagne being chilled, presentation materials arranged. The giant screen displaying our impressively upward-trending results. These quarterly announcements had become important cultural moments for the newly merged company, establishing traditions that would define us moving forward. As we reviewed the presentation materials together, I marveled at how effectively Veronica had distilled complex financial and technological achievements into compelling narratives. Her marketing instincts remained unparalleled, now enhanced by a deeper understanding of our strategic vision. The sustainability initiative messaging is particularly strong, I noted, reviewing her slides. You've made the technical innovations accessible without oversimplifying their impact. I had good material to work with, she acknowledged. The engineering team has exceeded expectations on the implementation timeline. Such exchanges had become our new normal. Professional respect layered with a growing personal understanding that, while not erasing our complicated history, had begun to build something healthier alongside it. James Kingston approached with data tablets for each of us. Final numbers for today's announcement, he explained. Even better than yesterday's projections. The merger synergies are materializing faster than anticipated. Excellent, I said, scanning the figures. Have these been incorporated into Veronica's presentation? Just updated, he confirmed before adding with a grin. The sister act continues to deliver impressive results. Veronica rolled her eyes at his phrasing but accepted the compliment with a nod. Even among our executive team, the sibling dynamic remained a source of fascination, though they'd grown more tactful about referencing it directly. As the room filled, with board members and key executives, Eliza approached with an update. "Your Uncle Philip just arrived. He's being escorted up now." "Perfect timing," I said. We had invited Uncle Philip to witness today's announcement, both as family and as a potential advisor on our expanding international initiatives. His diplomatic experience offered valuable insights for our growing global presence. He entered the boardroom with his characteristic, understated confidence, hugging both Veronica and me before surveying the preparations. "Quite the production," he observed. "A far cry from your family reunion revelation 6 months ago." "Thankfully," Veronica quipped, though I maintain that Rebecca could have chosen a less dramatic moment for that particular announcement. "Where would be the fun in that?" Uncle Philip winked at me. "Some truths deserve a memorable setting." The playful exchange reflected how far we'd come, able to reference that pivotal moment with humor rather than hurt. The family dynamics had indeed shifted as predicted, with relatives adjusting to the new understanding of both our positions. Cousin Martin had eventually stopped pitching investment opportunities after receiving firm but polite declinations. Aunt Elaine had transitioned from worried concern about my financial future to proud updates about her successful nieces to anyone who would listen. As the presentation time approached, Veronica and I stepped aside for a final review of our speaking points. We had developed a rhythm to these events. I would open with the strategic vision and financial results. She would follow with market positioning and client success stories. Then we would jointly address questions. "Ready?" she asked, straightening, my collar in a gesture that somehow managed to be both sisterly and slightly controlling. "Ready?" I confirmed, resisting the urge to comment on her adjustment. Some battles weren't worth fighting. As we took our positions at the front of the room, I caught Uncle Philip's encouraging smile from his seat near the back. The gathered executives and board members settled expectantly, tablets ready to take notes on our announcements. "Welcome, everyone," I began, "to our first quarterly review since the completion of the Meridian-Axion merger. I'm pleased to report that our integrated approach has exceeded projections across all key metrics." As I shared the impressive financial results, I watched the reactions around the room, the satisfied nods of board members, the proud expressions of our executive team who had worked tirelessly to make the merger successful, and Veronica's attentive presence beside me, waiting for her turn to speak. When I concluded my portion and introduced her, our transition was seamless, a synchronized handoff that reflected the working relationship we'd developed. Veronica stepped forward confidently, bringing her trademark energy to the presentation of our market achievements and client successes. And with our expanded capabilities, we've secured 3 major renewable energy contracts that would have been beyond the reach of either company independently, she explained, highlighting key partnerships on the display behind her. As she spoke, I found myself reflecting on our mother's long-ago prediction that Veronica and I would be unstoppable if we ever aligned our efforts instead of working at cross purposes. Caroline Lancaster had seen what we couldn't, that our differences could be complementary rather than divisive. When the formal presentation concluded and champagne was being distributed for a toast, Uncle Philip approached us. "Your mother would be immensely proud," he said quietly. "Not just of your professional achievements, impressive as they are, but of seeing her daughters finally standing together instead of apart." The observation touched something deep in both of us. Veronica's composure flickered briefly, a hint of emotion breaking through her professional veneer. "We're still figuring it out," she acknowledged. "But we're making progress." "Substantial progress," I agreed, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. The chairman of the board called for attention, raising his glass. "To Meridian-Axion Global's exceptional first quarter, and to the leadership that made it possible. The Lancaster sisters have proven that vision combined with execution creates remarkable results." As glasses clinked around us, Veronica leaned, close to whisper, "Still hate being called the Lancaster sisters as if we're a matched set." Still prefer your Honda to a proper executive car, she countered with a hint of her old judgment, but softened by the slight smile that accompanied. Some things never change, I acknowledged, and some things do, she replied more seriously. For the better. Later, as the event wound down and executives began departing, Veronica and I found ourselves alone by the window overlooking the city, the sunset painting the skyline in dramatic oranges and purples. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing, broadly to encompass not just the view, but everything it represented. Our professional success, our evolving relationship, the unexpected path that had brought us to this shared moment. Not exactly, I admitted, though Mom seemed to think it was possible. She always did see more clearly than the rest of us, Veronica reflected, especially when it came to her daughters. We stood in companionable silence, watching the city, lights begin to twinkle against the darkening sky. The competition that had defined our relationship for so long hadn't disappeared entirely. Perhaps it never would, but it had transformed into something more constructive, driving us to elevate each other rather than diminish. "You know," Veronica said thoughtfully, "I still think that Honda of yours is an embarrassment for someone of your position." I laughed, recognizing the callback to where our story had turned 6 months ago. "And I still think your obsession with status symbols reveals a fundamental insecurity about your true worth." She clinked her glass against mine. "To understanding each other better, even when we disagree." "To sisters," I offered instead, who finally stopped getting in their own way. As we turned to gather our materials and head to our respective evening commitments, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the window glass. Two very different women with the same determined set to their jaws, the same focused intelligence, in their eyes, standing side by side rather than in opposition. Some inheritances weren't measured in money or assets, but in the values and connections that shaped who we became. Perhaps the most valuable legacy our mother had left us wasn't any material possession, but the pathway back to each other, a journey that had required both revelation and reconciliation to complete. The Honda that had once been a symbol of our differences now represented something else entirely, a reminder that true worth wasn't measured by external appearances, and that sometimes the most valuable discoveries happen when we look beneath the surface to find the unexpected connections, waiting to be acknowledged. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more inspiring content. Tomorrow's video reveals another shocking family revelation you won't want to miss. Let us know in the comments if you've ever experienced a surprising discovery about someone close to you. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.